All right, welcome everybody. Tonight's debate is on the papacy. It's going to be Rami versus Classical. Classical is defending the papacy, and Rami is taking the negative. The format is there's going to be 10-minute opening statements for each, starting with Classical. Then there's going to be 5-minute rebuttals each, and then 15 minutes of cross examination time. During the cross examination, the person asking the questions can interrupt as they see fit, and the person answering the questions cannot reply with a question. Um, they might be able to ask a clarifying question, but please keep those minimal and try rephrasing questions if necessary. With that said, let's get on with the debate. Okay, so Classical goes first. When you're ready, go ahead and start talking, and we'll go ahead and start your timer.
All right, cool. Thanks for bringing on Blackout. Thanks, Rami, doing the debate. So let's get into it. So, as a faithful member of the Roman Catholic Church, I'm honored to present a defense of the office of the papacy as Christ instituted it and as the Church has devoutly held this teaching throughout history, from the beginning and in perpetuity. The papacy is a cornerstone of the Church's ecclesiastical tradition, and that's why I'm here to provide the sufficient needs to understand the role of the Roman pontiff and how his authority is absolutely necessary in light of the early Church's teaching on ecclesiology. Now, to define the role of the papacy as it is known in the Church, there will be three properties of this office that are distinct from the role of the other bishops. This will be primacy, supremacy, and infallibility. Now, to look at the primacy of the role of the Pope in the early Church, we can easily find this in the unanimous writings of the Fathers when they speak of the role of the Pope in the Holy Councils, which has always shown, with little to no contention, that the Pope does, in fact, have authority and primacy over conciliar decisions and decrees in ecumenical councils. This is shown practically when we see Pope Leo the Great annul Canon 28 at the Council of Chalcedon. He says, and I quote Pope Leo, he says, "As for the resolution of the bishops, which is contrary to the Nicene decree, in union with your faithful piety, I declare it to be invalid and annul it by the authority of the holy apostle Peter." And another thing that we see when the Patriarch of Constantinople, at the time of this council, writes a letter apologizing to Pope Leo the Great about this, about the canon that was declared and that Pope Leo annulled. He says, and this is confirmed even in the East in a letter from the, or sorry, even so, the whole force of confirmation of the Acts of Chalcedon was reserved for the authority of your blessedness, Pope Leo. Therefore, let your holiness know for certain that I did nothing to further the matter, knowing always that I held myself bound to avoid the lusts of pride and covetousness. Also, when Pope Gelasius claims the ratification of ecumenical synods are confirmed not by ecclesiastical privileges, but according to the apostolic authority of Peter, he says, "Let no true Christian ignore the fact that the constitution of any synod, which has been approved by the consent of the whole church, can be executed by no other see than the first, which confirms any synod by its authority and watched over it through continuous supervision, especially before its principate, which blessed Peter the apostle obtained through the word of our Lord, and which it has always retained and continues to retain." That's in his writing, Patrologia Latina. Um, and finally, when St. Jerome gives a strong and emotional statement when writing to Pope St. Damasus I, he cries, "So I communicate with none but your blessedness, that is with the chair of Peter. For this I know is the rock on which the church is built." Matthew 16:18. "This is the house where alone the paschal lamb can be rightly eaten." Exodus 12:22. "This is the ark of Noah, and he who is not found in it shall perish when the flood prevails." Now, to move over to some of the evidence in the East, where they also accept this thing, and not only in the Western area. Emperor Justinian, when he writes to the Pope, he says, yielding honor to the Apostolic See and to your holiness, and honoring your holiness, as one ought to honor a father, we have hastened to subject all the priests of the whole Eastern district, and to unite them to the See of your holiness. For we do not allow at any point, however manifest and indisputable it be, which relates to the state of the churches not being brought to the cognizance of your holiness, since you're the head of all the holy churches. I'm going to skip a couple of these things. So, not only do we see this in the history of the church from the various theologians and the historians within the church, but this is also recognized in secular history and scholarship from the likes of Dr. James T. Shotwell and Dr. Luis Ropes Loomis in their book, The See of Peter. Um, they say, "Everyone has heard how the dissolution of the imperial fabric of the Roman Empire in the West opened up fresh vistas of opportunity to the head of the Western Church, and how the papacy of Gregory VII and Innocent III grew out of Leo I and Gregory I. But the student who has read the records of the papacy of the Roman Empire is also aware that the famous sermon of Leo on the Petrine supremacy, quoted in so many textbooks, and his assertion of doctrinal authority over the Council of Chalcedon were but repetitions and forcible terms of claims that were first enunciated by his predecessors 200 years before. Such a student may examine one by one all the well-known declarations of papal power from the 5th century to the 19th. And those are the secular doctors that are studying the history. Now, to move to the infallibility of the Pope, we see statements from various popes in the early church, and we even witness like statements from the Eastern Fathers. The main statements that we will be paying attention to for the infallibility of the Pope is not a papal decree in the early church, such as the ones in the 19th century, but that the early church in both the East and the West believed that the see and chair of Peter was divinely instituted, and therefore eternally immovable and unshakable in the face of error or heresy. And if it is shakeable by heresy, we would then have to commit to the idea that Christ did not fulfill his promise through Peter. First, we witness Pope Saint Gelasius I in his letter to Emperor Anastasius I in 494. And it is normal for the hearts of the faithful to submit to all priests in general who discharge their divine duties properly. How much more unanimous must it be that the one assigned to the see, to whom the supreme divinity has willed to give preeminence over all priests, and whom the universal piety of the Church has in the following years constantly celebrated, it is here that your piety realizes with evidence that never under any human pretext can anyone rise above the privileged position of him whom the voice of Christ has placed above all, whom the venerable Church has always recognized and devoutly holds in the first rank. They may be prevented by human presumptions, the decisions of divine judgment, but overcome they cannot by any power of anyone. So here it is clearly stated that no power from anyone can override the divine institution from Christ to Peter. Now, moving towards the east a little bit, Saint Methodius, the brother of Saint Cyril, writes, "It is not true, as this canon states, that the Holy Fathers gave the primacy to Old Rome because it was the capital of the empire. It is from on high, from divine grace, that this primacy drew its origin, because the intensity of his faith, Peter, the first of the apostles, was addressed in these words by our Lord Jesus Christ himself: Peter, lovest thou me? Feed my sheep. That is why, in hierarchical order, Rome holds the preeminent place and is the first see. That is why the legates of old Rome are eternally immovable, and that is the view of all the churches." Now, he specifically says eternally immovable. According to my opponent, such a thing would be heresy and could never be believed by the church. And now to St. Cyril, what he says is, "This apostolic church of Peter reigns alone, immovably established, enforcing silence and stopping the mouths of all heretics. And we, from the necessity of salvation, not drunken with the wine of pride, confess together with it the formula of truth and of the holy apostolic tradition. For this is the rule of the true faith." And this was Pope St. Agatha's famous letter. This is one we definitely can't miss. "For this is the rule of the true faith, which this spiritual mother of your most tranquil empire, the Apostolic Church of Christ, has both in prosperity and in adversity always held and defended with energy, which it will be proved by the grace of Almighty God, has never erred from the path of the apostolic tradition, nor has she been depraved by yielding to heretical innovations. But from the beginning, she has received the Christian faith from her founders, the Prince of the Apostles, and remains undefiled until the end." Now, here I have clearly shown the abundant evidence from the early church that the primacy/supremacy of the papal office through his authority over the decrees of councils, and the infallibility of the office due to the nature of his divine designation, which was instituted by Christ. And I'll yield my time there. Thanks.
All right, perfect. You got about a minute 15 left, so good on the timing. All right, let me go ahead and reset the timer. All right, that was Classical's opening statement. Thank you, Classical. Up next is Rami's opening statement. He will be also having 10 minutes. Whenever you start, Rami, speaking, we'll start the clock.
All right. Well, thank you, Classical, for this debate. Thank you, everyone here for listening. Thanks to Blackout and for moderating. And I'm gonna jump right in. I'm gonna quote to you. So first of all, every single source that I'm gonna use is gonna be posted at the end in the document that is gonna be a gold mine for refutation of the papacy. I will post this document, and you're all gonna have access to every single source I'm gonna refer. Um, I'm gonna quote first the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica on Dollinger, Johann Joseph Ignaz von. This is, the article. An immense ferment took place in Bavaria, where Dollinger's influence was greatest. The strongest determination to resist the resolutions of the council prevailed. Just to put this in context, this is Dollinger. He's a doctor of ecclesiastical history, and he was alive at the time of the Vatican I Council. And this addressing his reaction to the Vatican I Council. But the authority of the council was held by the Archbishop of Munich to be paramount, and he called upon Dollinger to submit. Instead of submitting, Dollinger, on the 28th March of 1871, addressed a memorable letter to the Archbishop refusing to subscribe the decree. They were, he said, opposed to Holy Scripture, to the traditions of the Church for the first 1,000 years, to historical evidence, to the decrees of the general councils, and to the existing relations of the Roman Catholic Church to the state in every country in the world. As a Christian, as a theologian, as a historian, and as a citizen, he added, I cannot accept this doctrine. So you can clearly see that even ecclesiastical doctors at the time of Vatican I were opposing this doctrine as not based in history. Now, jumping right ahead, I'm going to show you from the ecumenical councils how papal infallibility and supremacy are in contradiction with the canons of the Holy Ecumenical Councils. I'm going to quote Nicaea 1, Canon 6. Let the ancient customs in Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis prevail, that the Bishop of Alexandria have jurisdiction in all these, since the like is customary for the Bishop of Rome also. Likewise, in Antioch and the other provinces, let the churches retain their privileges. And this is to be universally understood, that if anyone be made bishop without the consent of the metropolitan, the great synod has declared that such a man ought not to be a bishop. If, however, 2 or 3 bishops shall, from natural love of contradiction, oppose the common suffrage of the rest, it being reasonable in accordance with the ecclesiastical law, then let the choice of the majority prevail. I'm also going to refer to the Canon 2 of the Second Ecumenical Council, which says bishops must not leave their own diocese and go over to churches beyond its boundaries. But on the contrary, in accordance with the canons, let the bishop of Alexandria administer the affairs of Egypt only. Let the bishops of the East govern the Eastern Church only. The priority is granted to the Church of the Antiochians, and in the Nicene canons being kept inviolate, and let the bishops of Asian diocese or administrative domain administer only the affairs of the Asian Church, and let those of the Pontic diocese look after the affairs of the Diocese of Pontus only, and let those of the Thracian diocese manage the affairs of the Thracian diocese only. Let bishops not go beyond their own province to carry out an ordination or any other ecclesiastical services unless officially summoned thither. When the canon prescribed in regard to dioceses or administrative provinces is duly kept, it is evident that the synod of each province will confine itself to the affairs of that particular province in accordance with the regulations decreed in Nicaea. But the churches of God that are situated in territories belonging to barbarian nations must be administered in accordance with the customary practice of the fathers. Notice this is establishing clear boundaries which absolutely refute papal supremacy. Moving on, I'm going to show you from the church fathers how they did not consider the papal office to be supreme or to even be infallible. I'm quoting from Cyprian. I'm going to start with Yeah, this is going to be against the letter of Stephen, which was the Pope of Rome, and it's Cyprian Epistle 74. Moreover, how great sin have you heaped up for yourself when you cut yourself off from so many flocks? For it is yourself that you have cut off. Do not deceive yourself, since he is really the schismatic who has made himself an apostate from the communion of ecclesiastical unity. For while you think that all may be excommunicated by you, you have excommunicated yourself alone from all. So obviously you can see his opinion here about the Pope trying to excommunicate him. Moving on, it's gonna be the same letter, Cyprian Epistle 74, but that they who are at Rome do not observe those things in all cases, which are handed down from the beginning, and vainly pretend the authority of the apostles. Anyone may know also from the fact that concerning the celebration of Easter and concerning many other sacraments of divine matter, he may see that there are some diversities among them, and that all things are not observed among them which are observed at Jerusalem, just as in very many other provinces also many things are varied because of the difference of the places and names. Now, this is, very early on, the Roman Church was being accused of vainly pretending the authority of the apostles and having traditions that were not in conformity with the ones in Jerusalem. I have so many things to go through, so I'm just gonna jump right ahead. Um, this is Cyprian Treatise 1. He says, yet, that he might set forth unity, he arranged by his authority the origin of that unity as beginning from one. Assuredly, the rest of the apostles were also the same as was Peter, endowed with a like partnership both of honor and power. But the beginning proceeds from unity. So, you can see how Cyprian viewed him, the other apostles all being equal to Peter. Now, I want to show you something that is not discussed very often. It's going to be the Epistle of the African Synod to Pope Celestine, Bishop of the City of Rome. For they have ordained with great wisdom and justice that all matters should be terminated in the places where they arise, and did not think that the grace of the Holy Spirit would be wanting to any province for the bishops of Christ, wisely to discern and firmly to maintain the right, especially since whosoever thinks himself wronged by any judgment may appeal to the council of his province, or even to a general council, unless it be imagined that God can inspire a single individual with justice and refuse it to an innumerable multitude of bishops assembled in council. Notice that they were, comparing their authority of the many in comparison with the authority of the Roman bishop, and they were arguing that the Holy Spirit is going to inspire all of us even more. Like it would be crazy to think that the Pope of Rome alone could match the authority and guidance of all these bishops, the innumerable multitude of bishops. Now, same exact letter says, premising therefore our due regards to you, we earnestly conjure you that for the future you do not readily admit to a hearing persons coming hence, nor choose to receive to your communion those who have been excommunicated by us, because you, venerable sir, will readily perceive that this has been prescribed even by the Nicene Council. Notice that these bishops from Africa were appealing to the Nicene
60
Council.
seconds.
They were appealing to the Nicene Council to vindicate their case that the Pope does not have the authority to bring back someone into communion whom they had excommunicated. They were writing to him this letter, rebuking him and telling him that he should not thenceforth allow people into his communion after they have been excommunicated by the African bishops. Now, I have many other things. I'll just read this last thing. Same letter. This is the canon of the letter at the end. Those excommunicated by us, ye are not be willing to admit afterwards to communion according to the decree of the Nicene Synod. And, I spent my time, so go ahead.
All right, perfect. Yep, we're exactly at time right now. All right, thank you for that, Rami. That was the closing of the two opening statements. Now we're going to move into the rebuttal phase. Each person will have a 5-minute rebuttal, beginning with Classical. All right, Classical, whenever you're ready, go ahead and begin your rebuttal. You have 5 minutes.
All right, so I think I got everything that was said there, or most of it. Von Dollinger, who was the first person that Rami mentioned, about his claims of papal papal infallibility and such things before Vatican I, was actually the leading thing that led up to the decision of Vatican I, because there were some people, a very small minority of theologians and in the church, that did question this this idea that was leading up to Vatican I. But it wasn't. It wasn't. So first of all, Dollinger was excommunicated after, because of his rejection of the multiple bishops that showed why he was wrong and why the early church had believed in the supremacy and infallibility of the church, and effectively from his view of not having an unorthodox view of the papacy, he was excommunicated. And there's tons and tons of bishops and theologians and everything that completely refutes Dollinger and his heresy. So, and then the council quote that you gave about the jurisdictions over, that is historically known as a disciplinary action of how churches are to inform disciplines in their local jurisdictions, and it is to be under the right of their local bishop. This is true. We don't even contend with that. My diocese is under the jurisdiction of my bishop, and it's not like the Pope. We don't have this like tyrannical bishop where he just comes stomping through neighborhoods and doing whatever he feels like. It's no, we still have local jurisdictions where people reside over them, and so this doesn't seem like a problem to me at all. And the other council, there's tons of other council quotes that are not seen historically as simply disciplinary actions, or are not contended upon. One of them is going to be the Council of Ephesus, where it says that there is no doubt, and in fact it has been known in all ages, that the holy and most blessed Peter, prince and head of the apostles, pillar of the faith, and foundation of the Catholic Church, received the keys of the kingdom from our Lord Jesus Christ, the Savior and Redeemer of the human race, that to him was given the power of loosing and binding sins, who down even to today and forever both lives and judges his successors. This is this should be clear that there's a universality in the sense of what Peter was giving to, or what Jesus was giving to Peter in the Council of Ephesus. We also have the Council of Chalcedon, where it says, "The most holy and blessed Leo, Archbishop of the great and elder Rome, through us and through this present most holy synod, together with the thrice blessed and all glorious Peter, the apostle, who is the rock and foundation of the Catholic Church and the foundation of the Orthodox faith, has stripped him, Dioscorus, of the episcopate." So we see another version of primacy here, and that's also going to lead it into Cyprian, where we were talking about Cyprian. Cyprian seemed to contradict his views on the papacy. It's going to be super long to get into, but one of the things that's really important to get into about Cyprian really quickly is that one, he does call the Church of Rome the principal church. It's the chair of Peter, the principal church, the first. And this doesn't bring in an issue. And also the condemnation, or not the condemnation letter, but the letter that Cyprian is writing to the Pope, if you look at it historically, who he's writing to is the legates, because there was persecution at his time, and Cyprian ended up going into hiding. And when the Roman legates, who were not only the Pope, but also many other priests and legates around, were writing to him and asking him, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? What's going on over there? Please update us.
60 seconds.
All right. And so then Cyprian then wrote back very hostile to the Pope and talking about how, like, you don't have jurisdiction over me. You can't do this. You can't do that. But the point is that he wasn't necessarily writing to the Pope on specific dogmas about the position of the Pope. He was writing to legates in a time of historical struggle about a specific topic. Okay, I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right, so Rami, you're up next with your 5-minute rebuttal. Go ahead and start when ready.
Right. So the first thing I wanted to mention is when classical mentions Pope Agatho, uh, just so everyone knows, Pope Agatho served as the Bishop of Rome from the 27th June 678 until his death. This is from like late 7th century, so it is kind of outside the parameters of the debate, but I'll just let it slide. It's fine. Now about the primacy, like it feels like everything that classical is bringing up points to the primacy of the Roman Church, which is not an issue. Like the Roman Church was again the capital of the empire. It was where everyone would go to do business, and like it's fine to attribute to such an ancient apostolic church, a high level of reverence and even a primacy. Now, primacy does not entail supremacy, nor does it entail infallibility. So I feel like classical is doing a really good job showing how there was a Roman primacy, but he's not demonstrating supremacy or infallibility. Now, like he mentioned the preeminence. Sure, the Pope of Rome can be preeminent. That does not mean it is supreme. That does not mean, you saw the bishops of Africa that we just read, they were rebuking the decisions that the Roman bishop was making on the grounds of the Nicene Council. And if you read the actual canon laws, you're gonna find that each bishop had a metropolitan where he had to, agree with his metropolitan. So if you were in the territory of Rome, all the bishops there had to agree with the metropolitan that would be Rome. But like there were other metropolitans like in Antioch and like in Constantinople and like Jerusalem and also Alexandria. They had their own diocese with their own metropolitan, and the Bishop of Rome had no authority over them. It was, if there was anything, it was dealt through general councils, like we saw here. So you could either hold a local council or a general council. Now let's see. The other thing I wanted to say is the first see is not an issue for us. Like Rome can be the first see. It's obviously a very important city. It's the capital of the empire, so it's gonna have a preeminence. That does not entail the things that classical is trying to prove. Now, I'm gonna mention one or two things with the rest of my time. This is Jerome against Jovinian, Book 1, paragraph 26. The church is founded upon Peter, although in another place the same thing is done upon all the apostles, and they all received the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and the strength of the church is established equally upon them all. So notice like this whole idea of like, well, look, Peter has the keys. I mean, Jerome is literally showing how all the apostles possess this equality of having the keys, and the strength of the church is established equally upon them all. They all have the keys. It's not just Peter. Okay. Now I had one more thing I wanted to bring up here, and I'll cede the rest of my time if I have yeah, if I have any. um let's see, I put it right here. So this is gonna be from Eusebius, church Eusebius, Church History, Book 5. There was a whole controversy going on with Victor trying to excommunicate a bunch of the bishops of his time, and so it says, but this, him excommunicating those bishops, but this did not please all the bishops, and they besought him, that's Victor, to consider the things of peace and of neighborly unity and love, words of theirs are extant, sharply rebuking Victor. Notice that, like, if he had the supremacy, well, by what right do they have to sharply rebuke him for trying to excommunicate people? You know, like they would have no right because he's supreme over them. They can't rebuke someone that's an authority over them for trying to excommunicate someone. And that's it. That's my time.
Oh, perfect timing, right at time. Alrighty. All right, so we're at time now. We are now going to transition into our cross-examination phase. All right, let me remind the audience that during this phase, one person asks the other questions. The person being asked the questions should answer the question without a question. Clarifying questions are allowed. Try to keep them to a minimum, and if necessary, if we get stuck on something, please try rephrasing the question. And each person will be given 15 minutes of cross-examination time, so we have plenty of that coming up. Let me set the clock. Give me a moment. Okay, and the first one to begin the cross-examination is going to be Classical. Classical will be asking Rami questions. All right, Classical, whenever you're ready, just go ahead and we'll start the clock. And again, I will give a 1-minute warning when it comes to that time.
All right, sounds good. All right, so one of the things that you said that I want to get to first. So does the fact that Rome is the empire, is that why there's primacy for the Roman Church?
I would say that it has to do with its importance. Yes, like the fact that it's the capital of the empire.
Okay, so when they had the Byzantine Empire, which was just the capital of the Eastern world, would you say that they held any primacy over the universal church?
They held some primacy over the eastern diocese, correct, at Constantinople.
Right, right. No, but I'm saying overall, because one of the quotes that I brought up was from Emperor Justinian, where he writes that all priests in the Eastern District are subject to Rome. So my question is, how could, if it's according to the empire and the emperors and whatever, in a jurisdictional sense, how could Emperor Justinian be submitting to the Roman Empire?
Mm, okay, that well, first of all, Justinian was emperor in the 6th century, but I'll let it go. Even if that's outside the bounds of the debate, you're
520.
appealing. Yeah, you're appealing to something that is in the 6th century, but that's fine. I'll let it go. Let's keep going. Uh, you're asking me why is he like commending? Like you said, the Eastern bishops had to submit to the West.
Yeah, Emperor Justinian, when he writes to the Pope, says, this is one of the quotes that I read. He says, "We have hastened to subject all the priests of the whole Eastern District to your see and your holiness." So what I'm saying is, how could it be according to its status of an empire? If we had an Eastern Empire that was very influential, arguably more influential at a certain time, um, how could it be according to how could primacy be according to the empire if the Eastern Empire was subject to the Western?
Well, first of all, I would say that Emperor Justinian doesn't like transcend the canon law. Like Justinian saying one thing doesn't go above Nicaea. Like the actual bishops are the ones of Nicaea, you know, the ones at Constantinople, like the ecumenical councils. They decide how that works. If Justinian wants to say like, "Hey, you guys have to submit to this guy," we don't care. Like Justinian doesn't tell the, holy ecumenical councils how to run their things, you know.
Okay, I'll go to the next question here. So is Peter the head and the foundation of the Universal Catholic Church?
I would say that Christ is the foundation. Um, Christ is the head, and Peter is, built upon Christ.
Okay, so how is your interpretation of counts of Ephesus and Chalcedon, where it says that Peter is the rock and foundation of the Catholic Church and the foundation of the Orthodox faith?
That's a fair question. I would appeal to, all the church fathers who saw, um, you know, uh, contrary to what you're saying, Christ as being the rock, and I would appeal to them. Um,
Right. Well, yeah, I don't. Of course, Christ is a rock, but what I was getting at a little bit was that there's an interpretation of who Peter is according to the church, and he is the rock and the foundation. of this ecclesiastical structure that we have. So that's fine if your interpretation of that council's it's just. Would you say that the Council of Chalcedon, when they said that Peter's the rock and the foundation of the whole church, that it was an incorrect statement?
I would have to look at it and the like check the circumstances of the quote and what they said around it. But because I would definitely not think like even if Peter is granted all this primacy, I don't think that necessarily means that he has infallibility or supremacy. Like you're still needing to demonstrate that.
Okay, that's fine. I'll move on to the next question here. That's fine for me. So would you agree that there is a papal office in the early church?
Uh, there was a bishop of Rome. He was, the bishop of Rome. You could say he had primacy, but he didn't have supremacy and infallibility.
Okay, that's fine. So there was a prime bishop which was regarded as having primacy in the church, though.
In the Church of Rome, and it depends on the era. Like if you look at the era of
First five
uh,
centuries. First 5 centuries.
okay, so early on, like the first 3 centuries, it was like a college of presbyters. It was like the presbyters together, and Jerome denotes how they decided eventually to elect a presbyter to be above all the others, and that's like the bishop. Jerome relates this.
Right. Right. So when we see the church expanding after Nicaea out into the east, uh, do you think that the church fathers are quoting one preeminent in which the rock, according to the church fathers, according to where the rock succeeds from?
Well, actually, you said the church was expanding into the east, but the eastern churches are actually more ancient than Rome. Like the other churches were established, like Jerusalem and Antioch. They were established by the apostles before the one at Rome.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. No, yeah, you're right about that. So, okay. And let me just say, as the church is expanding, just in a general sense, was the bishop in which Peter was succeeded from Peter, um, was it shown from the early church fathers and from the councils, specifically Ephesus and Chalcedon, which I quoted, did they receive the bishop of Rome as a special authority, according to the others?
Yes, I think you did. You were able to demonstrate that Peter had some sort of primacy. Correct.
Okay. So, where did this primacy go? And maybe a better question is, in your church, who holds this primacy?
That's a fair question. So the Church of Rome having, like primacy doesn't mean that they are able to maintain this primacy eternally. It's in accordance to their orthodoxy. So if they're following Orthodox teaching, then they're a great example, as they were for many years, and they uphold the apostolic faith. Now, if they start to innovate and think of themselves as supreme or infallible, then like that revokes their like primacy in the sense that they're teaching heresy now.
Okay, so according to Jesus's promise to Peter, that is witnessed by the church, that Jesus obviously founds the church, and then he hands an authority to Peter to found the same church. That office fail, or did it fail?
Mm, I think that the establishing of the church and Peter successfully feeding the sheep and strengthening his brethren never failed because the church is still well and alive today. So I don't think it failed. It's just transmitted throughout all the churches throughout all the world. In an equal way. Like it doesn't need to be specifically at Rome.
Right, but okay, no, but what I'm saying is that the office that Peter was instituted as, the specific office, did that office fail?
Uh, I would say that the Bishop of Rome fell into heresy, and you yourself agree with this. Many times the Bishop of Rome fell into heresy, and then you had to excommunicate him or replace him, and
No,
you
no.
you
I
still
don't know. Hold on. I definitely don't believe that. So hold on. Okay. So did the Bishop of Rome never fell into heresy? Did the uh, office that Peter was instituted as by Jesus, did that fail and fall into heresy?
Well, I just answered you. They literally excommunicated Pope Honorius, if I recall.
He wasn't. That's a different topic. He wasn't a heretic, but so okay. So it did fail and it did fall into heresy. So there is no office that succeeds Peter anymore. Is that correct or incorrect?
Well, I would say it's um, through the apostolic, deposit, Peter's, preaching of the gospel, his seat is that of the apostle Peter, and that never failed. Like I said, because the church is well and alive today. But that, like, Peter didn't just take care of Rome, right? He was at Jerusalem. He took care of them too. Like he took care of many churches, right?
Right. So okay. So the seat didn't fail. So where's the seat now? Where is it?
Well, I'm not talking. Listen, I'm not talking about specifically like the succession in Rome from Peter. That can fail, but that which Peter established, that was the once and for all faith delivered unto all saints, that never failed.
Okay. Yep. That's kind of the answer that I was looking for. All right. I'll succeed my time. You can go to Rami now.
Okay, great. Give me a moment. Let me reset. All right, so now it's Rami's turn to do cross-examination of classical. Rami has 15 minutes. Go ahead and start when you're ready.
All right. So first, I'm gonna show you something that Augustine said. I'm gonna ask you a question. So, this is from his letter 82. He says, "It is to the canonical scriptures alone that I am bound to yield such implicit subjection as to follow their teaching, without admitting the slightest suspicion that in them any mistake or any statement intended to mislead could find a place." So the question is, did Augustine, according to the statement, consider himself bound to yield such implicit subjection as to follow the teachings of Rome without admitting the slightest suspicion that in them any mistake or any statement intended to mislead could find a place?
Right. So what's the question?
Well, did Augustine, according to the statement I just showed you, consider himself bound to yield such an implicit subjection as to follow the teachings of Rome without admitting the slightest suspicion that in them any mistake or any statement intended to mislead could find a place?
No, I don't think Augustine's wrong in saying that.
Okay, well, if you say that, then you're throwing away, papal infallibility, because everything Rome says could be a mistake or it could be misleading, like on purpose.
No, well, okay, so in this case, right? Since we brought up Honorius a little bit before, this actually did happen with Honorius, because Honorius, what got him excommunicated was his lackadaisical understanding, or not understanding, but his lackadaisical uh, enforcing of his power to allow his area to believe in a misinterpretation of a text and fall into heresy. So stuff like this does happen. Popes can be lackadaisical in their jurisdiction, and it can cause problems in the church, which may even lead to heresy. That doesn't necessitate that the Pope's itself is a heretic.
Right, sure, but notice the specific statement here is that, it could be the case that a mistake or statement intended to mislead proceeds from Rome, and no matter the conditions, even if it's an ex cathedra statement. Like Augustine didn't believe the Pope to be able to produce something that is completely free from mistake or error, that is, infallible.
Okay,
Now,
so I mean that's a claim. So what's the question for it?
well, sure. I'm just responding to what you just said. According to this logic, then Augustine did not consider the Pope to be infallible, or it doesn't. This doesn't address the supremacy. But we'll just move on. The question two is going to be, did the councils establish a supreme jurisdiction for the Bishop of Rome during the first or second ecumenical council? Can you provide any evidence with either of these two ecumenical councils that would support papal supremacy as claimed in Vatican I?
Yeah, in the two councils that I quoted, Council of Ephesus and Council of Chalcedon, they both quote the Church of Rome um, as being blessed through the Apostle Peter and is the rock and the foundation of all churches. This is going to fall under the primacy. And then the popes at the time of the councils and the fathers who see over the councils are specific, because that's what I said in my opening statement, was that I'm not here to claim that there's some like 19th century Vatican I declaration or 20th century declaration. What I'm showing is that all of the surrounding documents show that there is a primacy and a supremacy of the Church of Rome according to the councils. And the evidence I gave was in my opening statement, where Pope Leo annuls an entire canon and decree from the council, and then the Patriarch of the East, or the Archbishop of the East, then apologizes to him and submits his decision for annulling that.
That's great. That shows that, you know, he held sway. He had primacy. That does not entail infallibility or supremacy. You know, that again. That's what you're trying to establish. Remember, you're establishing, you know, some sort of primacy that he had, which I'm willing to grant. You know, the Bishop of Rome was definitely preeminent. That does not mean that he was infallible or supreme. Now let's see. Notice my question was specifically about the first and second ecumenical councils, because those ones delineate the jurisdictions of each of the dioceses. Like each jurisdiction was delineated from the territories, and so can you show me any evidence that the Roman bishop was considered to have a jurisdiction beyond that of the Rome?
Yeah. If an entire, again, with the Council of Chalcedon and Pope Leo, um, if an entire decree within an ecumenical council can be annulled solely by a pope, and that is enabled across the entire church, then yes, that's supremacy.
Well, concerning this Leo controversy that you bring up, I'll actually spend like a minute or two addressing this. This is from an article on this topic. It's about Leo and that specific council. However, during the reading of Leo's tome, three passages were challenged as being potentially Nestorian, and their orthodoxy was defended by using the writings of Cyril. Due to such concerns, the council decided to adjourn and appoint a special committee to investigate the orthodoxy of Leo's tomb, judging it by the standard of Cyril's 12 chapters. As some of the bishops present raised concerns of their compatibility. And then it goes on. Now, notice that Leo is being, basically questioned on his heterodoxy, because some of his passages from his tomb were potentially Nestorian, and so they didn't have an issue questioning his teachings as being fallible and wrong, and then like how do you address this portion of Leo's tomb being put into question and held over against, in comparison with Cyril of Jerusalem, who was considered the gold standard?
Yeah, that was a crazy time in church history, that's for sure. But I just don't see a problem in how this is contending against anything I've been saying. Like, we question the Pope on things all the time. Like, he's not like this tyrannical, invincible person. It's like, no, we can have theological questions about the Pope. We have to discern these things, and we have to discern what our priests say. We have to discern what our bishops say. This just isn't. It's just not a problem. And Leo's tome, that's a big, long debate on its own. I just don't think but overall, it doesn't fall into this category that the Pope doesn't have supreme jurisdiction over all the churches.
Okay, so I'm okay with that. Let's go to question 3. According to Newman's essay on doctrinal development, As developments which are preceded by definite indications have a fair presumption in their favor, so those which do but contradict and reverse the course of doctrine which has been developed before them, and out of which they spring, are certainly corrupt. For a corruption is a development in that very stage in which it ceases to illustrate and begins to disturb the acquisitions gained in its previous history. The question would be, considering that the ecumenical councils prohibit bishops to go beyond their administrative domain, how is papal supremacy not condemned by Newman's sixth criterion?
Because what I responded to that in the previous was that I was saying that in that canon, what they were giving was a disciplinary action for a disciplinary action for the individual churches on how they're going to be of a jurisdiction to their areas. That but this doesn't have anything to do with dogmatic definitions that impact the entire church. But mostly what they're saying is that when you have a local synod, the local synod is bound to that area. That's what they were declaring. Not that when you have dogma that is proclaimed under an ecumenical council, which, as I pointed out and showed, that ecumenical councils are underneath the Pope's authority. Then when dogmatic definitions are proclaimed in there infallibly, that doesn't apply to that canon. That canon is specifically about local jurisdictions and synods.
Well, the thing is, they specifically delineate the jurisdiction of each of the each of the patriarchates, and they don't mention any patriarchates that has supreme jurisdiction. So it just seems like you're making it about these councils. This is not even talking about like councilary decisions. It's talking specifically about the ability of a pope to interfere in ecclesiastical matters beyond his diocese. It's basically prohibiting the Pope to take action in a diocese that's not his own. You need to demonstrate that's not what they were talking about, because that's how it's been understood historically.
Well, that's just an argument from silence. You're just saying because it's not there, it's not true.
No, that's not what I said. I said it's a positive argument for limiting jurisdiction, and there's no papal supremacy anywhere that is mentioned in any of these councils. You're having to demonstrate that they had in mind some sort of papal supremacy. Otherwise, you're just like you're completely adding that into history.
Okay, that's just a claim.
Well, I mean, I'm asking you to demonstrate evidence that they held to papal supremacy in any way, shape, or form. That's what I'm asking. Now we can move on. Let's see. According to the Canon 338, Section 1 of Vatican I, it is for the Roman Pontiff alone to convoke an ecumenical council, preside over it personally or through others, transfer, suspend, or dissolve a council, and to approve its decrees. Given that Rome did not convoke, now I'm asking you this, like the canon is over. Now, given that Rome did not convoke, preside, or even participate in the Second and Fifth Ecumenical Councils, how can the claim put forth in Canon 338 be considered correct?
Well, there was so the way that it did operate in the times of the empire. This is just historically speaking, that because we had an empire that ruled the entirety of Christendom, the person who conducted the council was the empire, the Roman Empire. He was the one who brought everyone together, funded it, and all these things. But what ratified the council was at the end of it was the papal decree. Was the Pope? That's why canons are annulled by the Pope in the early church, and that's why canons are confirmed. That's what makes them dogmatic. Is the Pope confirmed them, not that he convoked the council at the time, because the emperor did that. It's just a historical question of who convokes it.
Well, you're claiming that the Pope has to ratify it, but again, the he wasn't even there, and he didn't send any legates for the specifically the second and fifth ecumenical council. They did not preside, they did not convoke, and they did not participate. No pope, no papal legates, and then the bishops still held the council and still viewed it as ecumenical. And then, in the instance of the Second Ecumenical Council, it was accepted a few years later by the next pope. Like, he said, yes, this is good. But, like, the fathers didn't care one bit about the pope being there or not. They still held the council and considered it ecumenical and binding. Now, I'm gonna ask you one last question. Do I have time to do this?
Yeah, you have 1 minute and 45.
Okay, so according to Canon 338, Section 2 of Vatican I, it is for the Roman Pontiff to determine the matters to be treated in a council and established to establish the order to be observed in the council. To the questions proposed by the Roman Pontiff, the council fathers can add others which are to be approved by the Roman Pontiff. Well, given that Rome did not determine the matters to be treated in the Second and Fifth Ecumenical Councils, how can the claim put forth in Canon 338, Section 2 be considered correct?
Wait, sorry. How can it be deemed correct if can you make the comparison real quick one more time? You can Blackheart, you can give him like another minute to repeat the question. Sorry.
Okay.
So it was specifically about canon, according to the canon 338, section 2 of Vatican I, it says it is for the Roman Pontiff to determine the matters to be treated in a council and establish the order to be observed in a council. To the questions proposed by the Roman Pontiff, the council fathers can add others which are to be approved by the Roman Pontiff. So the question is, given that Rome did not determine the matters to be treated in the Second and Fifth Ecumenical Councils, how can the claim put forth in Canon 338, Section 2 be considered correct?
Well, because they were ratified by a pope. It just may not have been the current one at the time. I would have to look more into the exact ones you're talking about because I'm not even 100% if that's true. But I just know the general dogma that's always been held is that when the pope ratifies it, it becomes an infallible dogma.
Okay, well, you say you believe that, and that's what was held, but I'm basically showing you how they held the councils even if the Pope wasn't there. And then they were ratified later. But like, if you read the councils themselves, they proclaim the canons. They have anathemas. They consider these things to be binding upon the church. Even if the Pope himself didn't send legates, it happened.
We're at time.
Okay.
All right. Well, that concludes the debate. The format that was provided didn't show any closing statements. It just says that we're going to go into the Q&A. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so are we doing a standard Q&A where someone from the audience asks a question to one of you, and then one of you answers it, and the other one has the option of offering input?
Yeah, that sounds good. Classical, you're good with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Let's go ahead and bring up our first question. That's going to be Bhog. All right, Bhog, go ahead and ask your question.
My question is to Classical.
Yeah, what's up, Bhog?
Can you provide a primary source document, not a commentary from a scholar, but a primary source document from the 2nd century that shows papal supremacy?
Wait, why do I have to like go by your standard of like why 2nd century?
Moderator, is he allowed to ask me questions?
I mean, he can ask a clarifying question. He's asking about 2nd century, if you have one or not, Classical.
2nd century. I mean, I would have to. Let's see. I may have a little quote mine going on here. One sec. Yeah, I think I'd refer to the Bible, Matthew 16:18.
Thank you. That's all. That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Bhog. All right, we don't have anybody in the queue. Anybody wants to ask a question, go ahead, raise your hand. We'll bring you up. All right, we've got Silent Night. All right, Silent Night, go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
This one is for Rami. So, I didn't find, even trying to put my bias aside, your quotes very convincing. Do you have anyone that says, for example, that the bishops are equal in exactly in terms of authority? Like there is no bishop that has, for example, a special, because you seem to contradict yourself in that you read a quote that said, or claimed that said that all the bishops are equal, but then you admitted that, even the Pope had primacy, and even primacy wouldn't necessarily mean equality. So do you have any clear-cut quotes that show your claim?
Yeah, I have multiple. Um, Just to clarify, when I show you from Cyprian, this is Treatise 1 of Cyprian, that he might set forth unity, he arranged by his authority the origin of that unity as beginning from one, Peter. Assuredly, the rest of the apostles were also the same as was Peter, endowed with a like partnership of both of honor and power. Notice that the word power there implies that they had the exact same power. So if Peter had that power, the others had that power. So there's no way that one of the apostles has more power, in the sense that like he can excommunicate uh, I mean the apostles had obviously all the power, but like when the apostles establish like a bishop, the bishop established by that apostle is just as valid and just as equal as the a bishop established by another apostle. That's what's entailed by these, and I can show you other examples. Like if
All right, perfect. Um, we're gonna go to EK. Okay, EK, you're up. Go ahead, ask your question, please.
Um, yeah, this is for Rami, and um, it'd be the view that the ecumenical councils have obviously a higher view than individual church fathers, and that the Holy Spirit guides ecumenical councils. And that in those councils, it shows that Peter is the head and foundation of the church, and that Peter himself is guiding the successor of the Bishop of Rome now and forever, and that Peter himself speaks infallibly through Leo. Um, so, do you agree that ecumenical councils, the view of Peter, have a higher view than individual church fathers?
I agree that ecumenical councils have more authority than individual church fathers.
Okay.
All right, thanks. All right, looks like we got Bhog up here for another question, and then we're
Uh-oh.
gonna go to Straps after that. All right, go ahead, Bhog.
Right. In my first question, I asked for a second century document that would show papal supremacy, and he produced Matthew, well, the book of Matthew. My question is, do you think classical that the book of Matthew is a second century document?
No, it's a pre-second century document. But the point I was making is that the Bible. The point I was making is that the Bible teaches it. And also the second century interpretations of that verse are going to be pretty unanimous on the fact that when it says "on this rock I will build my church," he's talking about Peter. Like, of course, everyone thinks Jesus is the rock, but I can give you Saint Dionysius interprets the verse that way. Saint Ignatius of Antioch interprets the verse that way. Saint Theophylact interprets the verse that way. So I can give you tons of the church fathers that interpret Matthew 16:18 in a way that Peter is supreme.
Moderator, am I allowed a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Um, Instead of documents that would be interpreting the Matthew verse, do you have any second century documents that are demonstrating the Bishop of Rome exercising his primacy over other bishops?
Well, just because I made this argument in my opening statement, or I stated this, that just because it's not exercised at a certain time doesn't mean that that's not the teaching. That's an argument from silence. So That's what I said. I was not there to show a specific place where a pope makes a decree like in the 20th century with the Marian dogmas, but simply for the fact that it is observed by the whole church that this is what the papacy is.
Oh, I'm not trying to make you show that he doesn't have to exert power. You can show another bishop, say the Bishop of Antioch in the 2nd century, acknowledging that power. Can you show something like that?
Sure, you could find Ignatius of Antioch saying that all churches must agree with Rome.
What document is that in? Where's the citation?
Yeah, that's in one of I think it's in his letter to the Romans. St. Ignatius of Antioch letter to the Romans.
You said, I think. Do you know it's there, or is it not? And if you say yes, can you provide the citation in chat?
Let's see.
It's the heresies, classical.
It's what?
Against heresies.
Ignatius of Antioch, or is that Irenaeus?
Oh no, no.
Oh, it was Irenaeus. You're right. It's not Ignatius. It's Irenaeus.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, against heresies. Irenaeus of Lyons.
What are you doing?
No, that's great. I want to interact with. Do I get to interact with this as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is really important. I'm gonna link this right now in the chat. This is from the book. I knew this quote would be brought up, obviously. So I did something.
Rami, your connection is roboting a little bit.
I'm roboting?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Let me get on. I'll use my phone connection to make the statement. Strange that it's lagging now. I'm getting DDoSed. The Jesuits are DDoSing me. I'm joking. I'm joking.
True.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Am I coming clear?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is from Goethe, who wrote a book, The Papacy. I'm gonna show you his reading of this quote. What he says is that the word there is that all the churches must go, everyone must go towards Rome, not that they must agree. And that word has been mistranslated. And you can, look at the Latin, you can look at other places that word was used. You're gonna see how he's not saying that you must agree with Rome, but you must go toward Rome, in reference to it being the capital and that everyone went to Rome for business.
Alrighty. Let's go to Straps. Straps has a question. Go ahead, Straps.
Yeah, mine's probably classical. It's not dissimilar to one about that was asked earlier, but it is around primacy. So the question is, I guess, what the dogmatic understanding of primacy obviously has changed over time in the Catholic Church, but how do you discern from the early church that these claims of primacy were not what Rami was saying around, primacy of honor or something like that, with Rome being the seat of empire, but instead was consistent with your modern or the current view, rather, of primacy in the Catholic Church, particularly maybe in the realm of like infallibility and supremacy,
Yeah, that's why in my opening statement I kind of combined primacy and supremacy, because you're right. When we think of when Roman Catholics think of primacy, we're talking about primacy of dogma. So that's why I provided the main one is Pope Leo the First, or Pope Leo the Great, when he annuls a canon or a decree in the council, and the Eastern archbishops and empire then submits to him annulling an entire decree of an ecumenical council. I think that's pretty clear that this is an act of dogmatic primacy, that he annuls a decree, not individual bishops. Which also would say that he's above ecumenical councils.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if Rami wants to comment, but I'll drop the stage. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Straps. Okay, we're gonna go to Daniel. Daniel, do you have a question, sir?
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. A question for the papist. How many, or it's probably two questions. How many ex cathedra statements or teachings have there been in the history of the church? And when was the first one?
That's a good question. And there's also tons of debate in the Catholic Church about this because some people go 2, some people say 24. I don't think they've been counted. I think it's a lot because I think a pope speaks infallibly a lot of the times. An ex cathedra doesn't have to be. But to answer your question straightforward, there's a lot of historical disagreement with this. I think it's a lot. I think it's probably in the 20s and the 30 range.
When do you think the first one was?
The first one would have probably been at the Acts or the Council of Jerusalem in the Book of Acts.
Oh, you consider that ex cathedra?
Yep.
Oh, interesting. And just a quick follow up on that, with the disagreement in what is ex cathedra. What's the how can the church benefit from a pope declaring things ex cathedra if there's so much ambiguity on what actually is ex cathedra?
Well, there's just ambiguity in the terms of layman. Like it's just like apologetic disagreement with like what it looks like. But Vatican I's very clear. Tons of papal encyclical. Like you'd really have to be like a canon lawyer to be able to like understand ex cathedra things. Like if you by just reading a document, because there's lots of ways to understand it that all lead to one thing, which is that it's an ex cathedra statement. But it's good to it's glad that we don't have a church where it's like I have to just interpret everything on my own. It's like we have a hierarchical system where it is known ex cathedra and it is passed down that this is what you must follow, whether I know exactly what document it is specifically.
Okay. All right. Let's go to Warfare. Warfare has a question. Go ahead, Warfare.
So this one's, I guess, for classical. At Vatican I, when this doctrine of papal infallibility was first being put out, there was a non-trivial amount of resistance to it. In particular, the Archbishop of St. Louis, Archbishop Kenrick, he was very vocal. Excuse me. He was very adamant that this was a novelty. And this meaning that the doctrine of papal infallibility that came to be codified at that council. And he brought forth work of an 18th century scholar. It's a French guy, Jean Delanoy. And what this work purports, okay, I haven't read the primary source of it myself because it's very, very hard to track it down. But what it purports, it centers around this notion of Matthew 16:18 and it being the rock, whether that rock stands for Peter or Peter's confession of faith and such on and so forth. And Archbishop Kenrick cited this evidence, this work, which basically demonstrates that out of all of the patristic references that the people of that time were able to gather up and evaluate, that the idea of Peter alone being the rock wasn't even like the primary position in the history of the church, and that there were just as many, if not more, saying that the rock was Peter's confession of faith. So here's what I'm getting at. If we've got a Roman Catholic at that time, like you can't say this dude was a sede or an old Catholic or nothing like that, because this is before the aftermath of Vatican I. Right. So if we had a Roman Catholic archbishop citing a Roman Catholic scholar to argue against what he perceived to be this new innovation of dogma, I'm not going to ask you to say who do you think was right or anything like that, but like, what's your honest opinion about just this resistance itself? Like, what does this resistance to you seem to suggest? Meaning, because to me, Vatican I makes some very clear claims that it's turtles all the way down. right? It's Vatican I all the way back. I mean, you can't read the document and walk away with less of a conclusion than that. It says it right at the end. And if that's the case, what do you make of this resistance?
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting movement in France, because France is where you found that. They're called the Gallicans. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it was a French group who opposed dogmatically defining papal infallibility, because they saw problems with it. Some of it was political, because they thought it was imprudent and it would exert like this denotion that Rome is like this tyrannical political thing that's going on around Christendom. Some of that was the problem, but the Gallicans did have a dogmatic theological problem with it. But it's just simply the fact that it's like, yeah, this is why Vatican I was coming around. There was a little. I mean, even in Vatican I think there was like 4 or 5 bishops at Vatican I who voted against it. So yeah, there was just theological disagreements with it. I don't think that's too much of an issue. The Gallicans were not sedes. It was just a group of French theologians and bishops who had a problem with the dogmatic theology that was circulating before Vatican I, because it was a big topic even before Vatican I happened. But I think that was solved. The Gallicans were defeated. GG.
Okay. That should wrap up the Q&A. And at this point, although we didn't plan for it, since you took kind of like the lion's share of the Q&A, Classical, if you want to take like a minute or two to share any closing thoughts, and we'll also offer that to Rami as well. If you guys want to do that, go ahead and take the time to do it. We'll start with Classical. Go ahead, Classical.
Sure. I think what I said in my opening statement, what I was attempting to provide, which is to show that there was a prime seat of Peter that was supreme above the other seats and the other sees, was very easily shown through councils, through church fathers, through various theologians at the time, historians, archaeological stuff. I think what I was looking to do was sufficient and successful, and I don't think the questions that I put forward were the questions that I put forward were answered, but in a way that would prove my opening statement. So that's all I'll say.
All right, perfect. Rami, a couple minutes if you have any closing thoughts or clarifications.
Sure. So I think we saw a lot of evidence for certain primacy that Rome enjoyed, and I think that's clear in the historical evidence. But I think that papal supremacy and infallibility were not clearly demonstrated. I don't think I don't think you can make a good case for papal supremacy or infallibility in the early church. And I wanted to mention, something about what Ike said, where I said, yes, I agree that the, ecumenical councils are more authoritative than single church fathers. But I don't agree with his view on what the council meant, when they, spoke about Leo. And, the evidence for that is, as I showed you, they examined Leo's tomb over against that which Cyril wrote. And, like Leo was still held in suspicion for unorthodoxy. And so, like I don't grant that they had in view any sort of supremacy or infallibility at that time. And thank you, Classical. Thank you, Blackout. Thank you, everyone, for the debate. It was nice.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for this excellent debate. It ran very smoothly. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the audience for attending. This is also recorded. This will be put up on the PNR YouTube, so you guys can check that out if you like. What I'm going to ask everybody to do now is, if you like, go ahead and filter down to the rooms down below, and we'll have like a after debate, debate. All right, guys. Thank you.